Welcome to All the Fanfare. My name is Eric Pierce. Today we're going to be talking about the Penguin. Yes, again. I didn't actually intend on talking about the Penguin again this week, but I'm fully caught up on the show now, and there's been some interesting and exciting developments on the show that I kind of just wanted to talk about. I think this pod will probably be a little on the shorter side just because we're kind of covering some of the same ground. But yeah, this show is it's really got me, man. It's super interesting, super exciting. Why do I keep saying super? But yeah, this show is just it's it floors me with how good it is and the twists and turns that it's making along the way. I really do think it's the best show on TV. So let's just dive into it. We're gonna break down episodes 3, 4, and 5 here on the pod in some detail. So this is gonna be your spoiler warning. I wouldn't listen to this episode until you're fully caught up and are through episode 5, because otherwise you're gonna get spoiled on some really juicy story developments. So I think the first two episodes of The Penguin focused almost completely on Oz. They're very Oz-centric episodes and get us on his side. Episodes 3 and 4 are a departure from that, where episode 3 is from Victor's point of view, episode 4 is from Sofia's point of view, and it makes the entire narrative more cohesive and more interesting because you're really seeing the motivations behind these characters and how they got to where they are in the present narrative. I'll be honest, when episode 3 starts with Victor, I wasn't super excited about it because he's just been okay to this point. To me, it felt like when you're reading a novel with multiple viewpoint characters and it comes to a character a chapter starts with a character you aren't enthused about or don't like. That's always kind of a bummer. It reminds me when I was reading the A Song of Ice and Fire series, which is, most of you probably know better as Game of Thrones, those books. Like, I was always excited to see a Ned Stark chapter, a Jon Snow, or a Tyrion Lannister, or a Daenerys chapter. I was way less excited to see a Sansa chapter pop up because she's just less interesting as a character. And for me, that was how I felt about Victor going in episode 3. But after the first few minutes of episode 3, and same with episode 4, they win you over and you're fully on board. And the end result is the narrative is so much more interesting and rich because, again, you do understand these characters more fully. So episode 3, the Victor point of view, it begins with a flashback. We're back before the explosion went off. So in the events of the Batman movie, the Riddler towards the end of the movie sets off some explosions that blow up the seawall and let in all this water and floods Gotham. And we get to see this from Victor's point of view. We get to actually see him go into his home. We get to meet his family, and he's just a normal kid. And you kind of got that gist that although he was trying to jack Oswald's rims, he didn't really know what he was doing. He was in over his head. He's just a normal kid forced into crime by circumstances, just trying to eat, trying to live. But in this flashback, after he meets his family, he goes to watch a fireworks show, and that's when the explosions go off, and he witnesses this wall of water slam into the apartment building where his family lives. And he basically sees them die. Like, he doesn't see bodies or anything, but from the way the water hits, the way it blows in the windows, it's obvious everyone is dead. Like, no one in that building is still alive. And it's a tragic moment. And then we're back in the present. We also do meet Vic's girlfriend at this rooftop party. And then when we're back in the present, they reconnect. Vic and his girlfriend reconnect via text, and he invites her over to the Penguin's apartment when he basically is kind of just apartment sitting while Oswald and Sofia go off on a meeting. And so what this whole thing sets up is Victor ends up torn between these two families. He has his past, which is represented through the girlfriend and someone he clearly cares about. And then he has Oz, who's become this surrogate father to him. And has given him something to latch on to. He's given him hope in this when he has none. He was cast adrift by this horrific, tragic event, and Oz has actually given him purpose in his life and offered him a path to something maybe even better. Granted, the methods are super shady, super sus, and super illegal, but he does give he's brought light into the darkness that was Vic's life. And so it just sets up this interesting dichotomy where he's going to have to choose between the two, and that's really what this episode is about. Is Victor kind of coming to that like me when I have to make a decision, I put it off forever until you're forced to make the decision. But that's really what this episode is about. So Vic wants to leave. Well, he says he wants to leave with this girl. She's going to leave Gotham. She's going to go to California. And Vic says that he wants to go. But he puts off talking to Oz about it, which to me signals that maybe he doesn't really want to go. And he talks about, to the girlfriend, he talks about how he's afraid of what Oz will do. He's seen Oz kill people, and he knows, okay, yeah, he knows about Alberto Falcone, like he's complicit in that murder. So it would make sense that Oz would just kill him to clean up any loose ends from his point of view. So that's why he claims that he's kind of, I think that's how he justifies to himself why he's putting off talking to Oz about leaving with this girl. But in my mind, to me, it always kind of felt like he wasn't sure. It felt less like he was afraid of Oz and more like he wasn't sure if he actually wanted to leave. So that's kind of the meta thing playing out in this episode. And during this whole episode, Oz and Sofia's fledgling alliance starts to bear fruit, or maybe you'd call it vegetables, I guess, because the new drug shipment that we heard about in the very first episode turns out those are some kind of newfangled mushroom, which is based on some kind of drugs that Sofia had been given in Arkham. And they end up calling it bliss because it just kind of blisses you out, puts you in a good mood, and it's going to be the hot new drug. And we're going to rule Gotham with this. They make connections with the triads to distribute. There's some complications, of course, but they manage to get the deal concluded. And they start dealing in a nightclub, and everyone is all about the new drug. Things are going super well. Victor has a PTSD flashback brought on by the pyrotechnics in the club. And at that moment, he's kind of almost split personality where he's in the past as the wall of water is rushing towards his home and his family, and he's in the nightclub, and he's just he's having a moment. So he goes and collects himself in a bathroom and starts looking at the texts from his girlfriend, which she's been sending him saying like the bus is leaving soon. And he's basically been ignoring him. He hasn't sent her any replies because, again, I think him not replying is the reply. And he just hasn't had the courage to say, I'm not coming, because choosing to stay with Oswald is almost a selfish choice because he's choosing to stay for material reasons. Like Oswald's offering him a chance at something better, which Oswald brings up later in the episode. He's offering him a chance at a better life. But I think the reason he's really staying is because of how he feels about Oswald. But we'll get into that in just a second, because Oswald comes into the bathroom and he's all celebratory, happy about how well the drug's selling and how this is really going to play out for them. And everything's lining up for them. Everything's coming up roses. And he kind of gets wind that, Vic isn't in a celebratory mood, and he sees the cell phone and he demands to see it. And Oz sees that he's been exchanging these messages with this girl talking about leaving. And it's this heartbreaking moment because Oz had just seconds before got done praising Victor about how good a job he'd done. And he's basically saying, in a Oswald way, saying that he loves him. Like, that's what it feels like to me, is like, hey, we're in this together, you and I. And that's a big deal for Oswald because at every turn, Oswald's been betrayed by someone, even to his own mother. And here's this kid that they're kind of in lockstep, and suddenly this kid wants to leave. And in fact, I think it's not even that Victor wants to leave that's what really hurts. And again, kudos to Colin Farrell with the acting, the expression on his face when he sees the text message and realizes what's going on. I think what really hurts is the idea that Victor was just going to run away and leave without saying anything, without explaining it to him, because he was so afraid of Oswald that he felt like he couldn't. And to me, it felt like Oswald thought that they had this relationship that they really didn't have at that point. And again, it's just another betrayal. And maybe I'm projecting things on Oswald because he is a bad dude, no question. But in that moment, it felt like Oswald was, again, another betrayal and another rejection. He's constantly being rejected by the people that are closest to him. And I think Victor leaving just felt like another in a long line of betrayals that have just made up his life, and that he's always going to be alone. And it's actually at this point that I realized my previous assessment of Oz, where I said I thought at the end of the show Oz is going to kill Vic. I don't know that I think that's wrong. I don't think he'll kill Vic. He could kill Vic right now, like, and in this moment he pulls a gun on him even. I don't think he'll kill Victor. I don't know that he can. I think their relationship has progressed to a point where it would be hard for Oswald to kill Victor. Obviously he could and he would if he needed to, if he had been betrayed or something, but I feel like at this point his affection for the kid is such that he would not choose to kill him under like pretty much any circumstances. And in fact, so he pulls a gun on Vic at this moment and is like, is this what it feels like? Do you feel like you're being held hostage? And again, it's all just betrayal on his face. Like, I was so good to you. I thought we were in this together. I thought we were friends, and you're only here because you feel like you have to be. And then he lets him go. Like, that's the moment where if he's gonna kill him, this is where he'd do it. Tie off that loose end. But he lets him go, and to me, that letting him go, as they say, as the saying goes, if you love something, let it go. And if it comes back to you, it's yours. And so he lets Vic go. He walks away, and Vic goes outside, kind of huffing about it. And he sees Oz's car, and he steals it. Which, as soon as he did that, I knew that he wasn't actually leaving, because there's no way he's gonna steal Oswald's car on the way out of town, because that's gonna just piss him off. It's just gonna rub salt in the wound. So as soon as he stole the car, I knew he wasn't actually leaving. And in fact, he drives to the bus station, and it's just to watch his girlfriend leave. And really, that's just him saying goodbye to his previous life, which is represented by the girlfriend. Like, she's the only thing left of his previous life. And here he sits in the car watching her board the bus, watch the bus drive off, and makes no move to get out of the car or contact her or anything. Just lets her go, and then he goes back to the club. He arrives just in time to see the Maronis have Oswald and Sofia at gunpoint outside, and he saves the day. Vic saves the day. It's a bit like Han Solo returning at the end of A New Hope. He just crashes in, saves the day, takes out one of the guys, and Oswald jumps in the car, and then they peace out. And in that act, he reaffirms his commitment to Oz, that he's putting Oz first, that Oz is his life, but he's completely severing the ties to his old life, and this is his life now. Everything Oz is doing, this crime venture that they're working on to take over Gotham, which, when you think about it, like, on the face of it, a mid-level gangster and a teenage homeless kid are taking on the ruling elite of Gotham City, and they think they can win. And Oz is a crafty guy, but when you just think about what's actually happening, it's kind of silly. But maybe they're living the American dream, I guess. So that's episode 3, and it's a good episode. Episode 4, maybe my favorite episode of the season. It's a hard episode to watch, but it's a really good episode. It's completely from Sofia's point of view, and it turns out that Sofia wasn't always broken. She wasn't always crazy. Turns out she was actually the only well-adjusted member of her family. And what happens in this episode is maybe the most horrendous example of being gaslighted I've ever seen. the gross injustice that she is subjected to is it's so unfair and so it just takes your breath away. It's just there's in my opinion there's nothing few things are more painful than I mean pain is painful, but in terms of like things that hurt that aren't physical, I don't know if there's anything more painful than telling the truth and being disbelieved anyway. And this is what she's dealing with and she gets sent to an asylum for it. Even more horrific maybe. And this is a question I'll pose to you. So Carmine Falcone strangles 7 women, including his wife, strangles them to death. What's more horrific? Carmine Falcone killing all those women or framing his daughter for the crimes and then having her sent to an insane asylum where she's just going to be undone? Like, I think it's the latter personally because that's her dad. He's betraying her. I don't know, man. That's messed up in all kinds of ways. And how do you compare like murder versus, but I mean, I don't know. I think there should be some loyalty and love between family members. And for him to, in one part of this episode, he's talking about how she's the only, like, of him and of Angelo, his son, and Sofia, his daughter, she's the only one that's like the good seed, like, and she's gonna take over the empire at some point. Like he literally says that to her, like, this is all yours. To go from that to, I'm saying I'm putting you away to cover up my crimes because you made the mistake of talking to a reporter and you walked away from it and nothing came of it. But like, you went outside the family and so therefore you're going to pay. Like, I don't know. That's just horrific. But in general, it just fits the tone of this whole episode. It is a disturbing episode, not just for the injustice, which is it's a whole thing unto itself, but it's just such a visceral example of not believing women and what comes of that, and the way that institutions are used as blunt force objects to harm people. And also, just as a sane person, I don't know if there's many more terrifying things than the idea of being placed into an insane asylum when you have all your faculties, when you know what everything's going on, but you're put in a place of madness that will drive you mad. And that's what happens to Sofia eventually, but it's just horrific. And the way the episode is constructed and shot, like, it's very intentional with the way they frame everything. And so it kind of, it leaves you on edge and leaves you feeling unsettled all over the place. Again, just in terms of what happens to Sofia, like how she gets into the asylum, and then what happens to her inside the asylum. It's some drama, man. Well, of course, the head doctor in Arkham is on Carmine's payroll, and basically he's manipulating her from day one and starts giving her some Winter Soldier style electroshock therapy, which I guess is maybe a form of like a lobotomy or something. And she starts to slowly come undone while she's subjected to this stuff, and the isolation and the abuse and the terror turn her into what they've claimed that she is, a killer. She snaps and kills Magpie in the cafeteria, and there's some obvious irony in the fact that she bludgeons this girl to death and then the next sentence maintains her innocence, that she's not a killer, while she's splattered in this girl's blood. It's also a watershed moment, or really bloodshed, because it's the moment she becomes what she's accused of being, and this is going to be her identity going forward. And it's as hard as that is to watch, to see this beautiful innocent woman be turned into something else. As hard as that is to watch, the most horrific shoe is yet to come, because shortly after that, Sofia says in a voiceover or something, I don't remember exactly how it plays out, but almost as an afterthought, she says it was another 10 years before she got out. 10 years she was in there being subjected to all this treatment and mistreatment, and this revolving door of doctors that came in and just played around with her brain, pulled things out and put things back in. And so you understand why the Sofia we meet at the beginning of episode 1 seems cracked and crazy, because all this stuff has been done to her. And it's it's funny because this show pivots entirely on this episode. It goes from Sophia, goes from kind of this crazy antagonist, this loose cannon that's maybe standing in Oswald's way, to the closest thing the show has to a hero. And like, she's not heroic in her actions, but she is aggrieved. Um she's been betrayed by everyone in her life, been wronged by her entire family. Like, her entire family turned their back on her. And in fact, it was worse than that, because they all co-signed on Carmine's Falcone's that she was this crazy psychopath killer of women, and put her away. Everyone but her brother in her family betrayed her. It was easy to root for Oz when Sophia was just this serial killer called the Hangman, who just got out of Arkham, and clearly some of Arkham came with her. Like, you could see the crazy peeking through the shutters of her eyes. It was different when it felt like that, versus now you understand how she got to where she is, and that she is due vengeance, and in fact Oz is responsible for what happens to her. So in retrospect, there's a moment in this show where you kind of see, it stood out to me as possibly the beginning of Oswald's villainous journey. And I don't want to put this on Sophia, but it just maybe it was just one more kind of dig in a long line of them that he's endured throughout his life, but it did stick out to me, and it made me wonder if this pushed him over, or if he always would have betrayed Sophia. I kind of think he always would have betrayed Sophia. I think that's who he is. I think that's his character. Is he's a survivor. He's going to do whatever he takes to climb the ladder. But there's a moment where, after Sophia meets with this reporter, she gets in the car and she's all frazzled and upset. Oz is her driver at this point. That's all he is. Like, I talked about criminal ladder. Like, he's not climbing, he's not on the lower rung. He's not on the ladder at all. If anything, he's holding the ladder for other people. He doesn't exist in this world. Like, nobody sees him. He's a driver. And Oz starts offering her some counsel because he sees she's upset, and says, you shouldn't be talking to reporters. And she lashes out and says, basically, this is above your pay grade. Like, I don't care what you have to say. No one cares what you have to say. You're just a driver. You're like irrelevant, is what she's saying to him. And it felt like, I don't want to say that, again, I don't want to say that she's the one who pushed him to betray her, but it felt like that could have been a bit of a, like, yeah, maybe this is my chance to get ahead. But again, I do still think Oswald is who he is, and I think betrayal and uh, lying and scheming, all these things are part of his personality, part of his persona, and a lot of that comes from his mother. But it did just stand out at me that right before he betrays her, she says this to him. And I don't know if if that was the push, or if that was just to muddy the waters. Like, the show likes to just kind of make you unsure who you should be rooting for. But it is one thing I did think was interesting is that the next time we see Oz, it's at Carmine's birthday party, and he's wearing this fancy new suit. And I believe the suit coat is silver. And it just stuck out at me as like a very Judas Iscariot reference. He's wearing this silver jacket. Like, those are his 30 silver he gets for betraying Sophia. And he's the one who says, your dad wants to see you, which, that's her death warrant. She's going off to jail at this point. So this episode jumps around a bit in time, but it ends in the present day with Sophia fully embracing her villainous persona. It's in a move right out of Greek tragedy. She kills her entire family. And though she does spare the little girl, it's a heinous crime. But at the same time, who can blame her? Like, after everything she endured, because these people turned their back on her, and the way they haven't even shown any contrition for what they did and shunned her, it's crazy. It really is. And it does make you think of Sophia a lot different. And this is just one of the reasons I love this show so much, is its writing and characterization is so rich and interesting. And episode to episode, they're kind of doing it intentionally. They want to keep you on your toes a little bit with your loyalties. But up to this point, we've been on Oz's side, and here you're not your loyalty's unsure. You still kind of like Oz, but at the same time, you're really seeing who he is. And in fact, beginning in the third episode, we're really starting to see Oz for who he really is. Because in the first two episodes, he just seems like this guy who's grinding. He's doing some cons and stuff to try and get ahead, but it's kind of a blue collar thing. He's competing against the elites, and how do you not buy into something like that, right? Episode 3, we start to see him for who he really is, because like even up to that point, um even knowing what he did to Alberto and the fact that he's lying to Sofia about it, he's so good with her that he even snows us. Like, he seems to genuinely care about her, and they have this nice little moment in the third episode when they're hanging outside the bar, the club. They have this nice little moment where he says like all he wants is the best for her, and he actually kind of gets teary-eyed when they're talking, and like you really believe it, like genuinely. And I think he actually believes it too, but at the same time, he's always going to do what's best for him. And then at the end of that third episode, the Maroney clan shows up, and Mother Maroney has them at gunpoint, and he starts babbling and saying whatever he needs to say to stay alive for just a few more minutes. And you get to see him through Sofia's eyes, because he's admitting to everything, that he's with the Maronis, that he's the one who's been betraying the Falcones this whole time. And of course we know that, but it looks so different in that second, in just that moment when Sofia's looking at him with dawning recognition that like he's the one. It's him. It's been him this whole time. Again, we've known that the whole time, but it just feels a little different when he's faced with the two people he's playing against each other, and he's just squirming, saying whatever he needs to say to the person holding the gun, and totally making everything irrelevant that he just said to Sofia, and their beautiful little tender heart to heart. Like, all that's forgotten at this moment. And so that whole scene in episode 3 sets him up on Oz and Sofia up on this collision course, which starts to play out in episode 5. Their alliance, which was kind of cool to see them on the same side, was very short lived. It didn't even last an entire episode. And now things are so much worse. Episode 5 is where the characters both start to make their moves to consolidate power. So Oz, he tries to make the deck a lot smaller. He tries to take out Sal Maroni, his wife, and his son / heir in one move, in one go, in one night, and just wipe them off the board. And he does get the latter two, but Sale ends up proven to be a tougher guy. And as Omar from The Wire said, you come at the king, you best not miss. Oz missed. So then he goes scurrying into hiding and starts freaking out. Like, we got to get my mom into hiding, and what are we going to do? And so he's panicking. Meanwhile, Sofia brings in all the people who worked for the family for this powwow. And her cousin, I think it's her cousin, Johnny Vidi's still there. He's still alive. She spared him because she needs some information, and he kind of was like the underboss that ran everything. Like, she needs to know where the money is and stuff. Johnny manages to talk his way out of getting killed immediately, and he's at this meeting, and then dude's an idiot. Even though he's on the thinnest of ice, he starts second guessing her in front of everyone and saying like some of like her first thing she suggests is a dumb idea, basically. So he's dead now because he's a freaking moron. And as his blood spreads across the table, Sofia announces that this is going to be a new kind of criminal organization, a different kind of family, one in which the profits will be split more equitably. So imagine like a worker co-op whose business is crime, because that's essentially what she's setting up. And oh, by the way, the Falcones are now dead. Like, literally, they're dead. Like, she's the last Falcone, her and the little girl. I don't know if it's her niece or something, a cousin maybe. But as a crime family, they're dead. They're now going to go by her mother's maiden name, Giganti. It's going to be a matriarchal mafia, which totally new vibe, totally new look. And I think it's awesome. Like, cool. Everything that Sofia's doing here is cool. Again, like, yeah, like they're setting her up to be a supervillain. But at this point, I'm more on her side than I am on Oz's, although I still like Oz. Just like there's residue of affection for Oz. And again, you just can't help but buy into he's still an underdog. So my loyalties are totally torn at this point. Like, I want them both to win, basically. So I hope that when everything's said and done, they're both still around. But we'll see. So Sofia goes to visit Sal Maroni, and they end up forming an alliance with the goal to A, kill Oz, and B, rule Gotham together. And let's just a new future for Gotham. And it's such an interesting development. And literally at this point, all the cards are stacked against Oz, and you have to wonder, like, what's going to play out? How's it going to go? There's still 3 episodes to go, and like things have gotten worse and worse for Oz up to this point. So the episode ends with Oswald lighting up an abandoned trolley station buried far under Gotham. It's basically like the only safe place left for him. And it affords them some strategic advantages, like they can grow mushrooms in the dark, and there's all kinds of tunnels and stuff, so they can pop up anywhere in the city. But it also feels very supervillain-esque to me, and I love it. So it's they're kind of seeding things for the future, and you can kind of see the shape of stuff that's going to happen. So that's exciting. This episode also includes Oz getting rejected by the 2 women in his life. So Eve, his girlfriend, pushes him away because he can't protect her, and he's put her in danger now. And so basically, until Oz cleans up the mess, she doesn't want anything to do with him. And then his mother physically shoves him away because he's forced her into hiding and squalor, and she's been promised a penthouse, and it's not what it is. And so both of them have rejected him at this point. And at this point, Vic is the only one in his life who seems to appreciate him for who he is, not what he can do for them. It's a pure relationship, which is again why I don't think he'll kill Vic. I do think he's going to kill someone to kind of complete his transformation to the Penguin. It's not going to be Vic. I think it's going to be his mom. I think he's going to snap and kill her. And you kind of can see it, and it makes sense because he's endured this abuse for his entire life. And I think he's going to be crying when he does it, but I think he's going to kill her because ultimately she is a problem in his life. And I think as long as she's around, undermining him, making him feel less than and second guessing himself, I don't think he can be the Penguin, the supervillain. So I think she's got to go, and I think she will go. So again, just some conjecture for the future. But yeah, I think we'll wrap it up here. That'll be it for this episode. I highly doubt we'll be talking about the Penguin next episode. In fact, I can guarantee we won't. I don't know what we'll be talking about, but it won't be the Penguin. I will talk about the Penguin one more time. I think when the show ends, I'll do a final episode, just kind of a retrospective on the show. Maybe, as a whole, and then also as it maybe ties into Batman Part 2, because I think they are going to play in together. That'll be it for this episode. Hope you enjoyed it. If you have any comments or anything, hit me on the Substack newsletter to allthefanfare.com, where you find the episode, and hope you're enjoying the Penguin like I am, because it's freaking awesome. All right, later, Gators. Peace out.